Dr. Syed Haider with the Dr. Haider Show, and I've got a great guest today. Dr. Jessica Rose is a Canadian researcher with a bachelor's degree in applied mathematics and a master's in immunology from Memorial University of Newfoundland. She also holds a PhD in computational biology from Bar Ilan University and two postdoc degrees, one in molecular biology from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and one in biochemistry from the Technion Institute of Technology. Her most recent research efforts are aimed at descriptive analyses of the vaccine adverse events reporting system. She's published three papers on it so far that I could see, and she's trying to make this data more accessible to the public. So she has a great Substack. You can see that on the screen. And I would recommend everyone go and sign up for it. And she's also on Twitter. So without further ado, let me introduce and bring on Dr. Jessica Rose. Hey, thank you so much for being here with us.
Hi, thanks for the
Hey.
nice intro. I also have a great sense of humor.
Okay. Good. People say that about me too, so I hope that's true.
Oh, good, nice.
Yeah.
Tell some.
Yeah, I'll joke about myself, I guess. I mean, I feel so humbled talking to people like you because you guys, like you and Dr. Peter McCullough, Robert Malone, I mean, you guys are like giants in the, I don't know, in this small field, of people speaking out about COVID-19 and the pandemic and the vaccines. You guys are kind of like the intellectual, the top notch in terms of intellectuals. And I'm just a physician. I treat patients. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a research scientist. I have trouble reading papers. And, one thing that we were talking about before you came on was that you were going through the Pfizer data dump, but I wish I had time to do this. I mean, it just seems like such a big morass of just like junk, I mean, it's like so difficult to read through it all. I mean, it's a huge amount of information and it's not, it's not like in spreadsheets. I mean, it's hard. It seems to me like you would have to take all of it and enter it into something in order to even start making sense of it. Like, what do you think about it?
I think that you have a really good understanding of it, actually, from what you just said. It seems like you're on our team. That's exactly what it's like. So, for those of you who don't know, well, in addition to all the data that there is to analyze now, Pfizer has been court ordered, thanks to Aaron Siri, to release their safety data, some of the clinical trial data, which the public should have access to, by the way. They shouldn't have to be ordered by a court to do so. And they tried to keep it hidden for 75 years, which means that we would all be dead by the time that data ever came out.
One thing I'm just going to jump here. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I
No,
just
go
wanted to point out that something that I just realized recently as a physician is that we don't really have access to raw data for most studies, right? Like 99.9%, unless there is a court order. And so like the data that is peer reviewed is the data that the company presents in their paper to a journal, and then it goes out to peer reviewers. So that seems to me like really like the rotten core of our medical system, like.
You're absolutely right. And I'll bounce off what you just said and say that at the end of every peer-reviewed article, there's a little section where you have to declare conflicts of interest, and they might be financial. And it's not enough that it's there, and if you have one, you shouldn't be publishing the work or performing the role of being the person to report on the data or to do the analysis of the data because you have a bias. But it's not enough. All you have to do is say, yeah, I work for Pfizer too, but it doesn't matter. That's how things work right now.
Yeah.
It's not right. It's like if there's, I mean, am I losing my marbles here?
No,
If
I think this is
there's
another big problem that people are really gullible. They think they're like, oh, it doesn't matter that their entire like
what
career is linked
really
to this one
matters.
company. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to come up with a good analogy, but I'm not sure I need one. It's like if someone's being paid by Pfizer to make the Pfizer data look good, and they're the one analyzing the data and reporting on the data, you know,
So
they're
what I just
incentivized.
what I actually realized was that most of the time, I mean, I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the time the company itself really just writes the paper for most
Yeah,
researchers and just, I mean, they can give some feedback on it, but they really can't make a lot of changes sometimes. I mean, this doesn't happen all the time, but this is something that's happening, as I understand, most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it shouldn't happen at all. So, I mean, now we have to back up and like contextualize, because we're talking about the rollout of experimental products into almost the entire human population here. This is a big
Hmm.
frickin' deal.
Yeah.
And these products were, they did not go through the safety and efficacy testing that biologicals always have to go through in order to be deemed safe and efficacious. And this isn't rhetoric, and this isn't my opinion right now. This is a fact. It takes 5 to 15 years for biologicals to go from concept to arm. And it takes a sequence of steps, not overlapping steps, not skipping steps, not shortening the duration. These steps are very, very clearly defined by, biological safety people. And so instead of having, the minimum of 5 years, say, for a conventional vaccine, which is a live or attenuated virus in a vector, we have a brand new product with two brand new technologies that we've never deployed in
Hmm.
this context or at this level, at this scale, rushed to people within a year and a half. And we're seeing all of these side effects now. So, the very least that should happen is that we should have access to the data without having to court order them to do so. Because we're in a crisis now. It doesn't matter who's trying to hide this. We are actually in a crisis now, a real one. And we need to find out why some people are responding the way that they're responding. Why are some people's CD8s going? Why are people's cancers coming back? Why are viruses becoming reactivated? Why is, everyone getting shingles? Why are people getting TTP? Why are children having myocarditis? These are serious things.
Yeah,
And we need to
so one
find
thing, let me sorry, just let me jump in here. One thing that's got me so puzzled is there's so many smart people like on Twitter and just in the government and in private industry, like people that I really respect and I've always respected, really smart people who just don't see this. I mean, are they blind? Are they purposely, willingly blind? Are they just not looking at it? Do they just really trust the CDC so much they don't even want to look at it? I mean, is that
out.
what it is? Or have they looked at it and they have some like valid objection to what you're seeing?
It's a big mix. It's a really big mix. The people who boggle my mind are the ones who are in like in relevant positions. Let's say with like say MD or PhD after their name, and they're not. The ones that freak me out aren't the ones defending the narrative. They're the ones um, ferociously defending it, and they're not defending it with science, they're defending it with ad hominem attacks. You see
Yeah,
this a lot, and I'm like,
yeah,
why are you emotionally involved here? This isn't about belief, it's not about emotions,
yeah.
this is about fact, and this is about data. It's not something to, it's not about beliefs, it's not a religion.
Right. Yeah.
It's like
But that's really how it seems, right? It seems like the
very
Spanish
much.
Inquisition, right? It really seems like it's like the church versus the heretics, It's like
Yeah,
and that makes me wonder, is it something just about like human nature, that is being attacked here and that people are reacting in this kind of visceral atavistic way that just like speaks to that animal side and not really, I mean, they can't connect with their higher being, they can't connect with their analytical intellect. Is that the problem here? I mean, it's like we have to go through this over and over again as human beings, like we never really
uh,
grow up as a species.
doesn't it seem that way? I mean, you just said it there, right? Like, how many frickin' times are we gonna do this?
And
I
every
mean,
time you think
why
they
is
think
it
it's
so
something totally different, right? It's like,
right?
oh, we're
And
we're so
nobody
evolved,
believes that
right?
it's possible that humans could possibly be doing something so bad to humans, because we've never done that to each other before, right?
Right, but I think every time it happens, they think that they've evolved beyond it, and we're different, right? Like this is a totally different thing. This is
Well, I
it's
think
nothing
you're
like
right
that.
about the like, people seem to be, not to sound like flaky here, but no, it's not flaky at all. I mean, we're all vibrating. Everyone seems to be vibrating at a really low frequency, and there's so very little connection between people. I mean, I don't know about but all I see are people walking around like this, like zombies.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so that's important, because not only are you like this, probably connecting to something superficial, let's say,
Yeah.
but you're not connecting to an actual living being and having an exchange of energy or speech or thought or anything like that. And it does change your vibration, I suppose, and your intellect, I dare say. I mean, if
Yeah.
you don't, your brain is kind of a muscle too. The neural
Yep.
connections are
Yeah,
going
yeah.
to, they're not going to keep forming and maintain themselves if you're not using them. And
Yeah.
this requires, I mean, a lot of different types of brain activity, I'm sure. But like, yeah, I mean, Robert Malone calls this mass formation psychosis, I think, or
Hmm.
mass.
Yeah.
And there's definitely, I mean, I call it a psyop because I think it is. I think human beings have been under attack for a very long time. What I can't figure out is, why the hell are you doing that? Like, has serfdom ever frickin' worked? And like I don't know. Anyway, we're getting off on a tangent here, but
Yeah, so I wanted to get, like, I did want to talk about kind of like the broader picture, and then definitely the Pfizer data dump and maybe some stuff about VAERS. But I think we have kind of looked at the broader picture in the last few minutes. So let's maybe get back to the data dump. I mean, have you had a chance to kind of like see anything in there, especially in the latest one? And has anything new shown up that you didn't know before?
well, from what I know, there are two like big teams attacking this. Me and my people, and they're not my people. I mean, we're a group of
Hmm.
people, and Naomi Wolf has hired a team of volunteers to comb through it as well. And we're kind of it's such a maze. It starts like just with file format.
Mm.
I mean, one of the most important documents that we've been trying to get information from is a PDF that's
Hmm.
4,400 pages long, and this is about the sites, like the actual clinical
Hmm.
trial sites, and some of the information about like the site ID identifier. Anyway, some details, and a PDF isn't an analyzable.
Yeah, you have to convert it to something that you can
Exactly. So it's
work
not
with.
just that. It's not one thing. It's like they have these little pieces of like these crumbs scattered in different formats and different pieces of this. And as you go into it, and as you peel the onion, we're asking ourselves, is this the complete set? Because they were ordered to release all of the data, so it should be complete, but it's not.
Right. So that brings up another question for me. Like, some people brought it up to me also. Like, who's blacking out certain things? Like, who decided to remove the denominator in terms of like how many doses had gone out?
Oh, that's different. Okay, so now we're talking about two different things. I went really deep there. So let's back up and go to what you're talking about. So there's a primary document called the what is it called? Just a sec. Let me pull it up. By the way, anybody who wants to access this data, a beautiful group of people have made this publicly available. You go to, just a sec, I'm just pulling it up now. I use a Tor browser and it's really slow. Oh gosh.
How would I find it? Maybe I can show it on the screen too.
Yeah, I'm trying to get that. It's usually open on my web browser, but it's not. Oh my God, it's probably being blocked. Just a minute, I'll pull up one of my Substacks and I always link it there. So they have provided all of the legal documents and the the documents from, some of the documents from the Pfizer clinical trial on this website, which I'm still combing through my substacks to find. My God, I have a lot. All right. It's called phmpt.org, okay? So you can find all the legal documents that have been revealed to date. They've been court ordered to release these documents over a period of 8 months, which is ridiculous. So every month we get, I think, between 10,000 page. It's just ridiculous the way that it's being done. Like I said, it's not only being done in crumbs when you get the data, but it's, spread out over this time period. And it's like, how many more people are going to get bloody injured in this interim? And how sometimes I'm looking at this and I'm thinking to myself, maybe it's not going to be possible for us to actually show anything here because it's too incomplete.
Yeah.
So, anyway, you can go there, and one of the first documents that they dumped contains a lot of interesting information about adverse events. There's also some documents that show that the lipid nanoparticles, which is the carrier of this modified mRNA, biodistribute, which we were told that it did not. So these documents were released now, but they knew all of this last year. This is what they've known. And the FDA, which is the regulatory body, the stopgap between bad products and humans, knew, because they have to review this data. And it clearly shows that these things go primarily into the spleen, the liver, the ovaries, and the adrenal glands. And we don't know the effects, of the lipid nanoparticles getting into the cells in these organs and tissues, or the byproduct, which is, they're going to dump their modified mRNA payload, and the body's going to produce these proteins, these spike proteins, modified spike proteins in copious amounts. And we don't know the effect of that either. So what we are seeing in the adverse event data, if I focus in on one adverse event type, are a lot of female reproductive issues. And you also hear women, if you ask anyone walking down the street, did you get the shot? And did you have a disruption in your menstrual cycle? 9 out of 10 times you're going to get a yes. Some of them have been mild, some of them have not. There's a lot of reports of women having miscarriages as well. And a lot of stories that you hear from women. A lot of women who've gone into menopause already, who got the shot, who started bleeding again. That shouldn't happen. I mean, something's very weird with the blood, with the cardiovascular system here, with inflammation, with the dysregulation of the immune system, the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, which relies on ACE2. So there are all these connectors and connections that weren't explored before these were put into people, and they're still not being explored, even though we know that there are problems. And we also know from the data that they didn't do any cancer-related investigations. They didn't do mutagenicity. They didn't do carcinogenicity. They didn't do anything related to potential mutagenicity because it wasn't expected. That's what they actually wrote in the document. They didn't expect it to be a problem, so they didn't do the studies. And now we found out from a published paper recently that this mRNA reverse transcribes, which means that it goes back into its DNA form, or it goes into the DNA form, which means there's potential to integrate into our genome. So the potential is there. And we know that this has been shown to happen with SARS. So there's no reason to think that the spike protein wouldn't do the same thing. Now, this hasn't been shown yet, but that paper is probably coming.
Hasn't been
and
shown in like actual human beings. It's been shown in the lab.
right.
Yeah.
And it's also horrifying to find out that the retrotransposon, the reverse transcriptase that was associated with this reverse transcription, is something called line 1, which is implicated in embryogenesis. So when you think about that, like you have to ask the question, a researcher will ask the question, is it possible that these things are messing up embryogenesis? We don't have any answers. That's the horrifying part, one way or the other. Maybe it doesn't, but we can't say that it doesn't because we didn't check.
Yeah.
So there's all this stuff in the Pfizer data that's really horrifying, which means that they knew beforehand and they still went ahead.
So what was the difference you were talking about between people like blacking out certain parts of it or redacting certain parts of it and what you're seeing now in the latest data dump in terms of I forget what you called them, but different things scattered throughout the files?
Right. So there was a lot. This one document that I'm thinking of the biodistribution, most of it was completely blacked out. I wrote a substack about this because I thought it was so funny. Like all the plots were just blacked out, and I'm like, why?
Like,
why
do
would
you know who decides to redact and like how much can they redact, or
I would
like
say it's Pfizer, but I don't. They would say, well, it's confidential, and I don't know who does it exactly, and I don't know how the hell they get away with that because
right?
I mean, in that primary document with the adverse events, where they have the adverse event table, you can find that in my Substack. They redacted in the original release the number of doses, so you didn't have a denominator, so you couldn't do any calculations. And all of us, even Campbell, that guy, even he made a video about this. It's strange. It's like, why would you do that? You don't want anyone to do any calculating, clearly. So yeah, there's, I don't know, there's so many unanswered questions. But safe to say, it's so contrived, it's so incomplete, it's so obtuse. And the people that I know who are working on this, they're way smarter than me. These are really smart people. And like I said, Naomi has an entire team of people. And even with all these brains, not paid to do this, by the way, just really interested in getting people the truth, we might not figure this out. We're trying, and
Because
we
there's
have.
pieces missing, right? I mean, that's the
Yeah,
main issue.
yeah. I'm still hopeful that we're going to be able to prove fraud. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, there's
we
so many pages and they're coming out hopefully fast enough that even the redactors will miss something, hopefully, right? Like somebody smart enough will see something that they should have covered up, because if they are covering things up, obviously, right? Why else would you redact it unless it looked bad, right? Unless there was something wrong there.
That's the obvious part, but the stuff that we're combing through now, it's not redacted. It's just the way that it was written down and passed. Like, we were talking about this today, this 4,400 page document of the site numbers and the details. I mean, that's a PDF file. So was that originally a CSV? Was that originally like a spreadsheet and they converted it to, because I can see that being the case. And
Yeah.
the reason they would do that is to screw with us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, you can try. We're going to screw back and hopefully we're going to win. But because, basically it's a war. But yeah, it's like such a shame because all this time that we're wasting, we could be doing immunological assays. We could be doing, a lot of bench work. We could be trying to find solutions for the bloody people who are suffering right now, which is the only reason I'm doing this. I mean, it's crazy. Like, why are there over 1 million people in VAERS right now, or up to 2 million in UDRA, in the yellow card? That never happened before. These people are real. These are government databases that are vetted.
Yeah.
So
So, one question that I really wanted to ask you, and this might just, be a matter of me having not looked into this deeply enough, but um, is there any other explanation, right? Like, for example, could it be the case that it's actually just the virus, or it's like long COVID or something that affected the entire population, both vaxxed and unvaxxed, and this level of like morbidity and mortality is being seen across everyone, and so it's obviously showing up in VAERS, but maybe it's triggered by the vaccine, or maybe it has nothing to do with the vaccine. Like, does the data tell us clearly that it must be the vaccine? It can't be anything to do with the virus itself, because or even lockdowns, right? Like, people have died from lockdowns, and that's increased morbidity and mortality. People are fatter, people are, you know taking more, like, substance. There's more substance abuse, there's more depression, there's more, stuff like that. So what the things that have changed, right? Multiple variables have changed around the world, in societies around the world, right? Lockdowns, masks, the virus, and then the vaccines. So can you say without a shadow of a doubt that what you're seeing in VAERS is due to the vaccines and none of the other variables that change for everyone?
a percentage, yes, 100%. So not 100% of the adverse events, but a percentage of the adverse events reported to VAERS, and I would dare say a high percentage, I don't know what it is yet, is absolutely attributable. And the way that we know this is, well, you can apply the Bradford-Hill criteria, which is how you determine causation in data. That's what the WHO do. They've actually, this is what they're meant to be doing. Okay, if you don't understand this process, which nobody does because they're not transparent about anything, but they use VAERS as a pharmacovigilance tool, which means it's a detection, a safety detection, a safety signal detection system where they use this Bradford-Hill criteria to determine the likelihood of causality. And they've done this with the rotavirus vaccine back in 1999 when they
So the
started.
Bradford-Hill criteria, those are things like if you increase the dose and you get even more side effects, that's obviously like
That's one of them. So dose response is one, temporality is another.
mhm.
If you have, yeah, I'll go back to what I was saying. If you have an acute reaction, that isn't anaphylaxis, for example, if you have a reaction of some kind within 15 minutes of an injection, you can't say, if you're an intelligent human being,
It's
that
just a
what is
coincidence.
happening to you isn't because of the shot. You can't. Now,
Right.
the problem with VAERS is that it's done in days. They have higher level data. We don't. So when you see day zero, if you subtract the vax date from the onset of symptoms date, the lowest you're going to get is zero. You don't have hours, so you can't determine if
Mhm.
that zero was 23 hours later or 15 minutes later.
Okay.
But it could be 15 minutes later. So more than half of all the reports, no matter what adverse event, standalone adverse event that you pick, occur within the first 24 hours. It's way higher than that if you go to 48 hours. So the evidence for causation here is very strong. Let's put it that way. But we don't know the percentage for sure. I don't remember what I was saying before, but it's let me put it this way. The last time a product was rolled out into humans on a mass scale was a flu vaccine. And it killed, I think the grand total of people that died in association with it was 53. And they pulled that product because that was considered past the level of the number of people acceptable to die in the context of a biological, which was 50. So why is it now? Let me just go to my website here.
So
Why
I
is
guess
it
yeah, the other side of the coin would be like, okay, it's gonna help save more people than it harms, right? That's, I guess, the other
no?
argument.
Kids don't get COVID, they
Yeah.
don't get symptoms, and kids are getting myocarditis from the shots. End of discussion.
Right.
It's causing the number one adverse event reported to VAERS in the context of the COVID-19 products, the Janssen, Moderna, and Pfizer. Guess what it is? Guess what the number one adverse event reported is?
I don't know. Is it myocarditis or clots
Nope.
of some kind?
Audience? It's COVID-19.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, exactly. It should be called the ironic injection. It's ridiculous. I mean, all the studies that if you're looking at the data around the world, it's very clear now that most of the people who are getting COVID and hospitalized with COVID have been injected multiply. Okay, so that's a very bad sign.
Sorry, yeah, myocarditis was a silly answer, but like
No, it wasn't.
what like the answer that actually might have made more sense would be like, kind of like injection site reactions, right? Like, muscle aches, or
Exactly,
those kind
and
of.
that's what I was expecting to see, because Paul Merrick asked me to do this search the other day, and I hadn't done it in a while. And the last time I'd done it, it was like, redness at injection site or something like that, and it was
Yeah,
COVID-19. I just about, crapped in my
yeah,
pants.
that's
Not really
incredible.
gross, but
That's hard to believe, right? Yeah.
it is hard to believe. I had to double check. Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. So talk about, I mean, there's so many points of evidence here that these things don't work, which is a good enough reason not to get them. And they're not safe, which is a really good reason not to get them. And it's
Yeah.
gotten to the point where people can just literally come out, officials can come out and say, well, it doesn't work. It doesn't even have to be 50% efficacious like we said it should be above placebo. We don't need that standard anymore. The FDA limit of efficacy is what it's called. We don't need that anymore. Basically, that translates to these things don't need to work and they don't need to be safe, because we're ignoring the safety signals coming out of VAERS, the UDRA system, and the yellow card system. And we're mocking the people who are actually raising concerns, valid concerns. So it's gotten to a ludicrous point here. I mean, I don't know what happened. I don't know how it happened so fast. It's mind-blowing for reals.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to ask you is, guess, where do you see this going? Do you think that there eventually will be a whistleblower or something that just turns the tide, like the
I
straw that
think the
breaks the
thing that
camel's
will
back?
I think the thing that will turn the tide is okay, if they weren't going to do another really stupid thing, which I think they're going to do in the fall, I think that it would become impossible to hide the adverse event data for very much longer. So it would reveal itself. That's what the truth does. However, my fear is that they're going to do something stupid in the fall, and they're going to mask all the damages being caused by their products by this new emergency.
Yeah, that's what it kind of how the Ukraine war felt, right? It seemed like the
Yeah,
tide was about to turn, or the dam was about to break. There was so much coming out, and then suddenly, like, we just stopped hearing about COVID completely in the
yeah,
mainstream media, and it's all
yeah,
about Ukraine.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's a horrifying thought, but I mean, when you kind of go back in your mind, in a rational way, the last 2 years and what we've been through and what we're still going through, it's not hard to believe. And on that subject, this WHO treaty thing, that needs to be shut down, because if that thing goes ahead and 100 and however many countries sign that piece of garbage, what it's going to mean is that you lose your personal sovereignty and your national sovereignty. You lose all sovereignty. Whatever some psychopath leading these organizations decides, and I am
Basically, Bill Gates. I mean, he's the one who funds them, right?
well,
So,
he's a pawn, but somebody is engineering this, or a few people are engineering this, and they don't seem to have a lot of empathy for human beings. That's why I say psychopaths. So if they decide that there's going to be another emergency and they declare a state of emergency, they can do whatever they want. And it's not hard to imagine what that might mean, because we've all experienced being locked up with nooses
Yeah.
around our necks, 100
Right.
meters away from our houses. We've all experienced arrests. We've all experienced these gag things over our
Hmm.
faces, being tested left, right. Well, what the hell is that? I mean, it's preposterous that they've normalized. They've managed to convince the public to such a large degree that this is okay. Because I'm here to say, from beginning to end, this is none of this, not one day of this is okay. A deadly virus should be able to sweep through our population, and none of this should happen. I really mean that, because without allowing herd immunity, real herd immunity, to take its role, we're doomed anyway. I mean, we don't need to get into that, but and I have pretty strong opinions about this because I study viruses and immunology. So
Yeah, I actually did want to ask you if you've heard of Gert Van den Bosch and his theory about his latest theory actually about the way that he thinks the virus is gonna evolve to become more virulent, specifically in vaccinated people. Have you heard his theory?
well, the thing, my interpretation, yes, I have, but my interpretation of that is that because of the state of the immune system of the people who keep injecting themselves, and that's doing something to your to specific antibodies. Okay, it's also doing something to the rest of your immune system, basically making it complete, or like lazy, if you want to
Hmm.
use that word. So what I think, my interpretation is that it doesn't even matter if it's kind of what we might think of as an innocuous um, version of this virus in non injected people. It might very well be very dangerous to somebody who doesn't have the same kind of fighting force that somebody who hasn't been injecting themselves with this targeted gene-based therapy over and over and over again. So it's a big concern, and it might actually be what we're seeing now, because we're not only seeing people, like I said to you, the number one adverse event reported to VAERS now is COVID-19. So it seems very clear from all the data that's being collected all over the world that the people who are injected multiply have lost their ability to fight COVID. They become more susceptible to infection with it, and to create to become symptomatic. But not only that, they seem to be losing their ability to control cancers, because the cancer resurgences are coming out the yin yang. Breast cancer, bladder cancer, testicular cancer, leukemias. Talk to any oncologist who's half honest these days about talking about what they're seeing in their practice, and you'll hear them say that. Wow, weird number of people whose cancers were in remission have come out of remission. And they're not making the connection. And
Yeah,
the
which is like it's almost like AIDS defining illnesses, right? That you see with HIV.
it's some kind of immune, you could call it a deficiency, and it seems to come back to the CD8s. I'm not, don't quote me on that, but like, when you start messing with, okay, listen, I'm an immunologist. I study pathogenic viruses. I'm vaccinated against things that people haven't even heard of yet. Like, I'm all over this. But if you undermine the gorgeousness of how this immune system works, you're going to have trouble, especially when you're talking about switching out a conventional vaccine, which is a live or attenuated virus, to a gene therapy based platform or mechanism.
So I have a question that I don't understand, and I'm just wondering if you have thought about this, or if you know the answers. So, like you're saying, we do get vaccinated against a lot of things, and it doesn't cause like a immunodeficiency, right? It doesn't. create vaccine-acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. So, do you know what it is about these particular? I know they're not vaccines, like injections, these particular mRNA injections, that's causing more of a broader immunodeficiency that's not specific to the virus, right? It's like, as I
No.
understand it, it's broader than that. It's not just that you're deficient, your immune system's deficient against the virus, but it's actually, it's like resurgence of cancers is like a bigger problem, right? Well, why is that happening?
Well, that would be CD8s. That would be my guess, but I don't know. I think that the lipid nanoparticles themselves,
Mm,
because the Moderna product uses something called SM102, which is it's a cationic lipid that's really toxic. So I've been saying this forever. I've written substacks about it too. Like, there are 4 different types of lipids that Pfizer and Moderna use to create their lipid nanoparticle fat bubble. And this is like a mix at certain specific concentrations of each in order to optimize deliverability of the product and the stability of the lipid nanoparticle itself. So one of these lipids is called a cationic lipid, and they're just known to be highly toxic to human cells. That's how they function. And so beyond the damage that the spike protein itself is clearly doing
mm,
by disrupting the RAS, by impregnating itself in epithelial cells, being mounted on MHC molecules for destruction by there's all these terrible things going on en masse in some people, but these lipid nanoparticles themselves, they're very destructive. So in terms of how this is altering the like causing immune dysregulation in a subpopulation of people, I don't know yet. And I'm this is exactly what's pissing me off about this, because these are the studies we should be doing right now. We need answers to these questions. We need them yesterday.
yeah, and so many of these, like most of these questions, if not all of them, it's like you're not allowed to ask these questions
No, you're
anymore.
not. That's the thing. You're called an anti-vaxxer if you're even interested in the
Yeah.
immunology. It's,
So
it's so
that brings
not.
up something I wanted to ask you. Have you had professional repercussion, like negative professional repercussions, or like, are you a part of academia? Are you kind of
No,
an independent?
I finished my last postdoc just before they declared the pandemic. So I was actually meant to go to Australia, move to Australia to start my professional surfing career,
Oh,
and that didn't happen. So yeah,
wow.
yeah. And so I needed something to do. So that's how, like, I wanted to teach myself R, and I decided to use the VAERS the data to do that. So that's how all this started. Um, but yeah, no, I've had hit pieces written on me, which they just make me laugh because I'm like, who the hell are you? Like, you don't even know me, dummy. And why
Yeah.
don't you have a conversation with me, and then you can write your funny little article. You'll probably get more reads if you have an honest conversation.
Yeah, yeah. So that brings up an interesting point. Like, have you come across anyone who's really um made you think twice about your own thoughts on VAERS, or given you like some real like substantive pushback, right? Like, is there anything out there, like, or is it all just straw man arguments? Like, there's really nothing. There's no leg to stand on for any of these critics. Or have you come across somebody who you've been able to have an actual debate with and
No,
dig in?
no, there is no one. To answer the first part of your question, no. All the people that I know who are really looking at the data from
Mm,
all walks of life, all different fields,
yeah.
backgrounds, just moms, epidemiologists, criminologists, lawyers, medical doctors, every single thing you can think of, have come to a consensus. And that's really strong. And so I'm like, all right, well, I love debate. I'm
Yeah.
dying to
Yeah.
have
To
a
debate
smart
somebody.
person who doesn't agree with me
Yeah.
have a conversation so that everybody from so-called both sides can hear what we're saying to each other and have a better understanding of both perspectives, because you know what? We need to bridge the gap here, people. You
Yeah,
know,
I think this one thing should really raise the red flag more than anything else, because you can find, like, on any subject, you can find so much debate on both sides of it, right? Like what the thing that crossed my mind lately was, like, you can go down the rabbit hole on both sides of the argument for, like, the moon landing and find so much more written about the moon landing than you can find about COVID-19 vaccines, right? I mean, or
what do you
injections.
think? Did it happen?
Or it didn't happen, right? People argue it didn't happen, it was
No, I
fake,
asked
right?
you, like, what do you think? Do you think it happened?
So what I remember doing was, I was in college and I just kind of like found all these websites saying that it didn't happen, right? They were debunking the moon landing and they were talking about optics and cameras and space
Yeah,
and
they had the
physics and stuff.
reflection in the thing and the
Yeah, all
flag.
kinds of stuff. And I was like, wow. And I was telling people, I was like telling my roommate, did you know the moon landing didn't happen? And then he was like, but go and look, did you read this other website? And so then I went and read this other website that was like debunking the debunkers. And at the end of it, I was like, you know what? I really don't know. I don't have the knowledge or the background to even like keep up with the arguments, right? And that's what I
Yeah,
realized. And I realized the same thing actually when I started looking at climate change. And so like I read a lot on both sides of the climate change argument. And I was like, oh my God, like they're, but a lot of times like there's a lot written on both sides, but they don't always answer each other's, like, arguments directly. Like they'll
yeah,
write a whole lot of stuff that supports their side and they won't directly address, the best arguments of the other side. But there are a lot of arguments to read through, right? Whereas
yeah,
with these mRNA injections, you really can't find anything to, like, you
yeah.
know
Yeah,
they're
and
just not defending
therein
it.
lies the problem. Like, even if you're like really in the know, I still have to hunt for stuff. And like what you just said is so important. It's mirroring what my Substack. I just literally just posted now what the message was, because I also do a lot of research. I watch everything. I listen to everyone except for Gates, because I cannot stand hearing that guy talk. Um, and I was watching a documentary that just kind of, the title kept coming up in a number of different places. You can read my Substack to find out what it's called. I don't remember. Anyway, so I started watching it and I got to minute 3, and I noticed I kind of have a hunter eye, because I used to go hunting with my dad when I was growing up, and I saw something, a mistake, and I was like, these guys are, they're talking about the fact that this is all a pandemic, and it was all planned from the beginning, and they're scheming us, and da 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 da, which is funny, because that's kind of, if you were going to pick a side, that's kind of where I am, and where
Mm,
all of these experts are, but this turned out to be a total farce. And I was shocked, because I'm like, how deceptive and predatory. Because in a time when everybody's confused, everybody, I don't care who you are, everybody's confused right now, looking for answers, looking for truth, looking for information that's reliable. This is really predatory, because it's preying on people who kind of want to believe in in I guess the good of people. I don't know. It's, read my Substack to find out what I'm trying to say about it. But I really, in a time where nobody even knows what disinformation or misinformation is or means,
yeah.
it's imperative for us to take a lot of time to come to a consensus on everything. Yeah, this is the one that I just wrote. So the message is, be careful what you stand behind and really take your time. I know that they're mocking this whole concept of doing your own research, but they shouldn't mock that, because basically
Yeah.
reading books is doing research. Listening to people from all walks of life and fields is research, and you should do a lot of that. The consensus of all the opposing voices is where you're going to find a grain of truth, in my opinion. So yeah, it was disappointing to see this, because this was just by fluke that they made this error. Like, the editor didn't spot
Yeah,
it,
right.
but they overwrote
Yeah, yeah,
material testing kit with COVID-19 testing kit, which is it's really deceptive. I
yeah,
don't like that at all.
yeah.
So I don't know who made this, but shame on you. You shouldn't be doing that. And it raises a really interesting question. Is this the people who are pro quote unquote narrative who created this to create more division? To make people buy into a false idea that this is, a big conspiracy, when in actuality it is a big conspiracy?
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
There's probably a word for that, like
There
red.
is a word. Yeah, like I don't know. There's a limited hangout, or it's not that. It's something else. But I know what you're getting at. Um, yeah, I mean, I think this does happen in the world, right? Where they put out these misleading narratives to, yeah. So it certainly does happen.
To throw people off, and I find that really repugnant, because it's predatory. I don't like predators. I don't like when people take advantage for gain. It's not nice. It doesn't serve any productive purpose. Um, yeah, I really have a problem with that.
So looking at kind of the bigger picture, if you had to guess, or what's the deeper purpose, if there is one? And just make one point that I've been worried about is if it was planned, right? If there was a plan behind all of this, or if it just happened and then they took advantage of it, right? Never let a good crisis go to waste, kind of thing. What worries me is what they were able to accomplish in terms of tyranny with a virus with a like 0.1 or 0.2% death rate,
Yeah.
when we have things with like 30% death rates, in our armamentarium of biological weapons, right? I mean, we have some really terrible things: smallpox, anthrax, plague, tularemia. I mean, it's just like we have a big list of things. There's Ebola. I mean, there's all kinds of things that could be released on a population to force, compliance with
Marburg.
really anything. Yeah, Marburg. Yeah. But stepping back, I mean, do you think it's like a depopulation kind of thing? I mean, if there was a plan behind everything, I mean, is that the higher level thing, or like looking back at the last 100 years or maybe 150 years ever since Malthus, right? Like this idea that there's a carrying capacity of the world, and a lot of elites still believe, like Gates is like Malthusian, he truly believes in depopulation, that and then there's the climate issue, and like, do they really believe in that? It's like, what is it? I don't get it. I mean, is it like, oh, there's not going to be enough to go around? Like, you guys, there's too many mouths to feed. I
No,
want
that's
everything
that's
for myself.
clearly, like, yeah, that's clearly a stupid idea that they're trying to perpetuate. If humanity decided to all be like constructive and productive, and um, not kind of work on this strange hierarchical destruction loop, um, then I mean, come on, sustainability. It's a ridiculous notion that there's not enough to go around
Yeah,
in theory. The
yeah,
reason why they can get away with that, though, is because of all the frickin' destruction of our gorgeous natural resources and planet. I mean, why in the effing F do we shit where we drink? And I'm being literal
right.
now.
Yeah,
Why do we dump
yeah,
forever like pollutants into our water? Why do we
yeah.
do
This,
that?
this thing just really upsets me, that like the entire like environmental movement has been hijacked by CO2. Like that's all anyone can talk about now. Like it just removes the oxygen from the room. You can't talk about all the really bad stuff that's going on, right? Like, all the real pollution, like, dumping in our rivers and in our groundwater and our air, like
We're cutting old growth
chemicals.
forests to make biogas and some stupid shit like that. I mean,
Yeah.
come on, people. You can't be that naive. There's my point is, it's like if you destroy all the forests, if you destroy the soil, the actual soil quality, like
Yeah.
most people call it dirt, it's not, it's soil.
Yeah.
It's a very complex, delicious mix of all sorts of different organisms, and
Hmm.
that's how things grow and die. If you destroy the oxygen content, the concentration in the air, replace it with sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and benzene, if you destroy the purity of the water, of course there's not going to be enough to go around. But here's
Yeah.
the thing: the rich psychopathic assholes are the ones who are doing this en masse.
Yeah.
The antibiotic resistant crisis that we have is because of this stupid factory farming thing.
Hmm.
I mean, the way that we abuse, I'm getting, into this now, the way that we abuse our planet and all the creatures on it is so inexcusable to me. And it makes no sense because we don't have to do that to survive. It's just, let's mass manufacture cars that we don't need. Let's mass kill entire species of animals so that we can have steaks. I know I sound like a bit of a granola here, but I'm just being excessive to make a point. There's definitely enough to go around. We're just not being a productive, constructive species because we keep falling into this stupid do loop of serfdom. So to
It's
answer
because I think like we're being lied to, right? Like people
of
are getting
course.
riled up about things
But
that
why do so many people believe the lies? Why can't they go outside and look around and not see what I see? I'm not special.
yeah, that's the big question. How do you actually like red pill people at a massive scale? And so like this brings me I just want to wrap up. I know we're out of time. If you have a couple minutes, just can you like do you see a silver lining to what's happened, and do you see a way
Yeah,
out? Do you see a way out for humanity, right? Like how do we solve it?
yes, absolutely. Hope springs eternal, and I'm an optimist. So, the great minds that have found each other in all of this is just exceptional. I mean, I've lost a lot, but I've gained more in all of this in terms of friends, colleagues, intellectual conversations. Like, wow, I mean, this to me is more brilliant than most of the academic experiences, not all of them, but a lot of them that I've had. I mean, having exchanges with such brilliant people with so many decades of experience between them, this is definitely a positive. um, it's sad that we have to create new parallel societies, but that's also a good thing because you know it's possible that if things work out a certain way that we could be the leaders of tomorrow.
Mm,
And wouldn't you rather have someone who's had 40 years of training in the medical field and experience with patients to be making the medical decisions over a frickin' stupid bureaucrat who's not even in his 30s? But, I'm just making another exaggeration, but
yeah.
seriously, you know what I mean? It's like there's too
And this is
many.
happening at every level. I mean, like in
Yeah,
hospitals, bureaucrats are deciding what doctors can
yes,
and can't test
yeah.
for and what they can and cannot
They're
prescribe.
deciding what they can do with their patients. They're having
Yeah,
their medical licenses revoked because they're prescribing ivermectin to their own patients.
yeah,
What the hell universe am I living in? I
I
mean,
know.
so yeah, I do. I think that it's extremely difficult what we're being made to go through. But if you keep the connections you're making close, rely daily on these, like the good connections that you have, that you formed. I'm talking to myself now, because
But I think it
it's
applies to a lot of us, like even the listeners. I mean, like everyone, right? Like it kind of like everyone has, I think, had the same experience that you're having. Like, I mean, it's like some people have like, said goodbye to friends and family and just like, I don't want to talk to you anymore. But they were replaced by a whole lot of other people who are like-minded and on the side of like truth and honesty and,
And the
bravery.
thing is, it's like I find I've had this conversation with many people. Like Pierre Corey and I are like brother and sister now. We've never met, but like we can't believe, like, every single one of these people seems to have a very high level of integrity. Um, so it's an intelligence, which, I have a different definition of that than most. I think intelligence and empathy are very interconnected. Um, so yeah, it's quite remarkable. And one of the ways out is through the independent, kind of spontaneous formation of these groups, because of the inherent nature of the beings. So it's and you know what? If we're all gonna die anyway someday, so we might as well like do what's right in the meantime, right?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for spending this time. I mean, it was really valuable for me,
Yeah,
to pick
thank
your
you.
brain, and I'm sure, like, I wish I had had time to talk, go through some of the comments, but maybe next time, maybe you'll have some time in the future to talk to me again. And
Of course.
just thank you for your bravery and for speaking out, and just for doing the work that you're doing. That's really, I think it's like one of the most important things that's being done right now is going through this data and telling people about it and spreading the word, so that people can share these kind of videos with other people. And just because it's really, the alternative media is one of the solutions, right? As long as we have it, and hopefully we'll continue to have it, as an option, as an alternative to mainstream media, this is how word is getting out, right? I don't
Yeah.
see any other way that we can spread it to more and more people, and eventually hopefully turn the tide by changing minds, one by one, and then hopefully, like, all at once, a lot of people will suddenly wake up from the
Yeah,
mass
I just
information.
I have far too much respect for my fellow human being, my fellow being in general, to let people be made fools of for any longer than they are being made fools of by no fault of their own. I really hate that. So I don't feel brave, but I feel like it's my duty to help people just see the obviousness of the deception in the data. Because it could just be as simple as one graph, and me saying, this is from here, go look yourself, and tell me if you're okay with what you're seeing. And most people would be like, what? That's not okay. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much again. This was really a pleasure for me,
You're welcome. Me
and I hope we
too.
can
It was a
speak
it was
again too.
a great hour.
Yeah. All right. Thanks everyone for joining us, and hopefully
Yeah,
Jessica will be
thanks
back with
everyone.
us soon.